Okay, so before the camera stopped, we were talking about Cambrian 1 and 2 was a little bit off, but 3 and 4 was okay. It was a horse race track.
Yeah, but it was a fun track, and it was a driver's track. But I from the first time I went there and spectated, I said I got to come back, and I saw some of the best racing I've ever seen at that track. I've seen some of the most amazing racers, I would say. There was a gentleman there named True Cheek that had not sure what it was, but he had a disorder where he couldn't hardly walk. But when you watch the guy drive, you would be, he was amazing. The guy was just fast. That's where I seen Jim Thurkettle race. I seen Dan Press race there. Orrin Prosser race there. I saw some of the what I would call West Coast greats race at that track.
We just got done racing at Irwindale with the SRL, and I saw Spangler there in the SRL.
I raced against Spangler at Saugus.
Bobby Lyon.
I raced against Bobby Lyon when I first ran the Southwest Tour. Bobby Lyon raced
and
there.
And Ron Esau.
Raced against Ron at Riverside.
It was kind of, Ron Esau told me he was just getting back into it. I think that was Irwindale was his first race, which was Irwindale's last race, as far as we know.
Yeah, Ron's an outstanding driver. He's probably a little rusty that he's been out of the car for a while, but he could wheel a car.
I didn't ask him what his brother Larry was doing.
Yeah, I can't even remember the last time I saw Ron race. Might have been Phoenix or something, or the old Mesa Marin.
So Saugus closed in '94, right?
Oh, I'm not sure exactly the year it closed, but that sounds about right.
Yeah, it's right around '94. What'd you do after that? Were you pretty much hitting Saugus anytime it was available?
Yeah, what I was running out here kind of pretty regular at the Vegas track, and any weekend that I could go to Saugus, we'd go to Saugus, and we'd make a weekend out of it. We'd usually go over on Friday and say go to Magic Mountain on Friday, race Saturday night at Saugus, go hang out at the ocean on Sunday, and then drive home. We'd go over to Tucson. Tucson was a paved NASCAR track back then in the 90s.
What was Southwest Tour?
It was run by NASCAR, and it was basically what the SRL is today.
But they were running at Saugus at that time, right?
Yeah, it was a touring series, the Southwest Tour. They kind of hit each track a couple of times. Essentially what the SRL is today.
Was that Press and Hornaday and... Dan
Press, Hornaday, Thurkettle ran it, Esau ran it, Mike Chase ran it, Roman Kalzinski was another one that ran in it. There was somewhere I've got some of the old programs and stuff with all those guys' names in it, but they're the ones that come to mind.
So they'd run at Saugus and then they'd go do other tracks?
Yeah, it was a traveling series. Basically, I want to say the SRL, when NASCAR did away with that series, they had a Southwest Tour and a Northwest Tour. And like Ron Eden and Garrett Evans and those guys like that ran the Northwest Tour. And it was a traveling in Oregon and Washington and Idaho tracks up in the Northwest. And NASCAR just dissolved it for whatever reason, I don't know, but they just did away with it. And they kind of modified it was the Davey Hamilton Wild West series. It was kind of an open comp series. It was doing a little bit of traveling, a small traveling series, and it kind of got absorbed into the SRL or however it worked out. But a lot of the people that run the SRL were people that ran the Southwest Tour. I say a lot of them, I don't know how many, but there's remnants of the Southwest Tour. I want to say Mike Kankey ran the Southwest Tour. Ron Esau, I know, did.
Kankey?
Yeah.
He runs SRL too.
Yeah. Yeah, he ran the old Southwest Tour. So did Steve Portengay was another one that ran in it. Those are some of the names I remember. I ran the Southwest Tour the very first year they had it. I ran the opening race at Phoenix. We went to Stockton, Roseville, I think was one of them. And then the next year they ran Sears Point. I went to the inaugural race at Sears Point. Then after that, it was just too expensive for me. I got rid of the car and started kind of playing in the dirt at that point.
So you still have a dirt car.
Yeah.
Still have your late model. How old is that late model?
I bought that in December of '96 from Al. We bought it as a complete roller. Went to Beaverton, Michigan, and got it. Brought it home, put a body on it, and started racing it. And I race it off and on. When I got into the dirt modifieds, and they were very affordable, and there was more tracks close to race it. So for a few years, the late model kind of took a backseat. I'd just run it here and there, not real, competitive with it, just kind of played with it. But yeah, I've had that car for a while.
Have you ever had the dirt car down to Mojave?
Yeah. The last time we ran regular at Mojave, 2009, I won they call it Days of Thunder Winter Series. They had I think 10 race series or whatever it was. And it was I want to say they started racing in January. And we won that series, the championship in that winter series that year. I used to go down to Mojave pretty regular. I haven't been there in a while. The Lucas thing and having the late model up in Ipost got me pretty strapped on time.
Which take you about two and a half, 3 hours to get to Mojave?
About 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, about 2 hours to Mojave. A little under 2 sometimes, just traffic and towing.
I haven't been there yet. So if you ever take it there, let me know. I'll come
I'll
watch.
do that. They get some pretty good shows. They'll get 16, 18 cars almost on any given Saturday night. A bad night for them is probably 12 to 14 cars, but I've been there sometimes on a Saturday night where there'll be 24 cars show up. So, and it's IMC runs their points series you can run regional points at any IMCA track. So sometimes you'll get some pretty what we call big name IMCA dirt racers show up at Mojave. Like, why is this guy here? He's chasing regional and national points, so he's going to race anywhere he can. And if Mojave can work into his schedule, that's where he'll go.
Now, what's the dirt track south of Havasu? Like 2 hours. Yuma?
South of Havasu? Yeah, I think it's Yuma. I think it's a little more than 2 hours, but yeah, Yuma's down there on the Indian reservation.
Do they run these kind of things? Or
Yeah.
just...
Yeah, they run. I believe it's an IMCA sanctioned track that they run at Yuma.
I think when we were getting ready to go to Tucson, I was taking one of the back roads in Havasu to get to where I was going. And I went by a hotel, and out in the parking lot were these huge haulers, like SRL haulers, and they had their sprints pulled out up on jack stands and doing whatever they were doing to them. And I was like, where the hell are they running those? So I pulled over and asked them. They said that there was some big thing down in Yuma.
Yeah, Yuma.
Have you ever raced at Yuma?
No, Yuma's been on my list to get to. Actually, I believe it's Blake Rogers' uncle. Dwayne Rogers races at Yuma.
Really?
Yeah, Blake has kind of a tie to Yuma. Yeah,
Does he have one of these or like a sprint?
No, they run a dirt modified, IMC dirt modified.
I'd like to get down there and see that sometime.
Yeah, they do some kind of winter sprint car series because Yuma in the wintertime, the weather's great. And there's one little winter series they run where a lot of the heavy hitters from the Midwest come out because they're farmers or related to the farming industry. When the winter comes, they don't do nothing. So they come out here in the West where they run these winter series. When we won the winter series at Mojave, they were getting 40 cars showing up for that series because there's nothing to do. If you're snowed in and you're from, Kansas or Missouri or something, haul out here and hang out here where the weather's nice.
If we don't have an event this next, because I think that big event you're talking about is February?
I think so. Through the winter months, they start just after the first of the year. I want to say the first weekend in January, they start racing down at Yuma.
If we don't have an event to go to, Tucson or Winter Showdown at Kern, we should go down and check that out. That sounds like that'll be a blast.
Yeah, they get for that winter series, they get a pretty good car turnout. I want to say they pay real good. So like I say, the guys come from the Midwest, and they'll have enough cars to run a B main, sometimes a C main. So that makes it interesting.
Maybe some guy will break a leg and they'll need a fill-in driver.
Yeah. I drove a guy named Phil Penny's car for a while, one of the Midwest guys. He left it out here when he came for the winter series. So during the summer, he called us and said, "You guys want to run my car?" And I'm like, "Oh heck yeah, I'll run that thing." It was a fast car. It was real fast.
That was a dirt modified?
Yeah, dirt modified. It was a GRT car. It was fun to race. It's different when you race someone else's car.
So let's get back to the modifieds. What kind of chassis is this?
This is a Dana stall car. And there's a story about this car. I'll be 60 next year, and I didn't, between the dirt modified and the late model, I kept my plate pretty full. Dana called me, and he knew I had a connection with a junkyard here, and said, "Hey, you still got the connection?" I said, "Yeah, I can check." And they just happened to have about 20 frames stripped off at the junkyard, already ready to go for somebody. And when I called the owner of the junkyard, he said, "Yeah, that guy's supposedly passed away, and he doesn't know who he had them for or whatever, and they've been sitting for months." He goes, "I'll work you a deal on them." So I called Dana back. I says, "I got these frames. I can get them for you." And he says, "Well, will you trade them for a race car?" And I'm like, I don't really need another race car. And I thought, what the heck? Because I had drove somebody else's car in a couple of Lucas races here and there. I thought, yeah, we can go try this. So Dana, we traded the chassis and a bunch of spindles for basically a roller, and then we got it from him and put the rest of it together and started racing it. So I'm not into it a whole lot of money, a little bit of labor, and it worked out. It gave Dana frames to build for people, and just helped the racing community by helping him, because they're getting harder to find these chassis. So it just kind of worked out, was for everybody. And now I got a Lucas car that I'm dealing with.
So far this season, tell me a little bit about your motor.
This is actually the motor that was in my late model. I've been running at Havasu for the last 3 years or 4 years. And we pulled it out and freshened it up, and it was just going to be a spare motor for the late model. But when this car came along, I didn't really have a plan or a motor for it. So we just threw this thing in there, and it's just a little flat top 350. It's got the Brodex spec heads. It's I'd say realistically 450, 475, maybe on a good day might make 500 horsepower. And on the smaller tracks, we do okay with it, but on the bigger tracks, we get our butts kicked. But it's allowed us to work the car out. The car handles really good. We're happy with the turn speed. We needed to go to these other tracks with it modified and learn, because most all the tracks we're running, I've run a late model at it one time or another. It's not the same. You don't run the same gear in a modified that you do the late model. They're a lighter car. They drive different, everything about them. So we just kind of been getting, acquiring the information we need. And my engine builder is up in Post Falls, Idaho. So it's not real convenient to just go get a motor. We're leaving Thursday to go back up to Idaho to race, and we're picking up the new motor for this car then. And it's supposed to be about a 625 to 650 horse motor, something we think will be at least competitive wise on the bigger tracks. We'll hold our own. But yeah, we're happy with the handling and the turn speed. That when you're down on horsepower like we are, all you can do is work on the handling, and we feel like we've got a pretty good handle on it. Race long enough to understand when you get more power, the car goes faster down the straightaway, so brakes are more of an issue. Different things happen when you speed a car up. But yeah, we've been on a learning curve with this car, and the Lucas series is, I would say, probably one of the most competitive series in the country, I would say. I don't know so much about the West Coast or East Coast racing, but there's some pretty good guys in the Lucas series. There's guys been there for a while that have their game down pretty good.
Have you noticed some of the times between first and say 15th? The difference is just a few thousandths or whatever?
Yeah, that's one thing about the technology today. The transponders, you can go online and look at everybody's times. They're even in the program, you can like I can take anybody in the field, like say whoever won the last race, and overlay their time, and it'll do a graph, and it'll show every lap, their lap to my lap, where, how, the rate at which you drop off, or how fast you were, when and where you were the fastest. So you can compare yourself to anybody in the field at any time, which that's kind of cool. The only thing it doesn't do is segment time, and we do a lot of segment timing. We know we're hurting in the straightaway, but we'll time ourselves in the corner, and our corner speed is as good as anybody else's. The exit of the corner, sometimes with a lack of motor, will show up, but transponders don't segment time, they just do total lap times. But we've learned a lot with this car, because it's a bump stop car, and all my other dirt cars obviously don't run bump stops, but my late model is a conventional sprung car, and I do pretty good with that car. We're very competitive with it, and I like it. I like the way it drives. I'm old school. The bump stop's been a learning curve.
So you've had Dana show up at one or two races?
Dana went to the first race with us, and well, actually he came down before the first race and tested with us at Havasu. And Dana's just an amazing guy as far as setup goes. Before I made the first 2 laps, he brought me in and made changes to the car, just the attitude of the car. And my input to him and his watching the car, we steadily made it faster. Even though we went down on used tires, and every lap on used tires, they generally get slower, the changes we made either made the car faster or at least maintain the same speed on used tires. And we came into the first race of the season at Havasu running pretty good, but Dana only came to the first test session with us. Up until we ran at Madera, we were on a phone call basis. I'd call him and tell him, what the car's doing, and he'd tell me what to change. And I needed to learn from him at the same time. I would think about it, think what I would change. I'd call Dana, and he'd tell me what to change. And I'm like, well, I would have done this. And he's like, no. And he'd tell me why not to do that. So it's been a learning curve, but he's been excellent support with us. And he knows we've been down on horsepower, so he knew we'd be working with the car more. And I feel comfortable with the car now. I feel comfortable with the last few races. I didn't need to call him. I knew what we had. I'd hot lap and felt pretty good. When we ran Irwindale, we actually, because we knew we were so far back in the field, I didn't even run on new tires. I ran on the tires I ran at Kern. So I qualified on 75 lap old tires and raced on 75 lap old tires. So by the end of the night, I had 150 laps on my tires. It made it fun because, boy, the thing got pretty free at the end of the race. They were gone. My crew guys, when I came in, said, wow, we've never seen a right rear tire that wore down. I said, well, that's 150 laps on that thing. And the car was pretty free. It was on the right rear most of the way around. To even be moderately competitive there, to even try to keep up, we had to free the thing up because Irwindale's got such wide sweeping turns. Turn speed's real important there. So we freed it up pretty good. There was a couple of times I thought I was going to spin out, but it was it's a great car. I really like the car.
You mentioned the bump stops.
Bump stops.
Have you guys been figuring that out on your own? Is anybody helping you in the pits?
Dana's been our main source of input on that. He gave us a baseline and we talked about it. We've changed the shock package from the original shock package we had. I've talked to a couple of people. Chris Spray gave me some input. I've known Chris and I've raced against Chris's dad. I picked his brain a little bit on some of the things that we're doing, just for general information. But mainly figuring it out, and that's one of the things I like to do with racing. I like to, I don't just want to drive it. I want to know why it does what it does. I make the essential calls on the setup. It's me that, in result, if it don't handle, it's me.